You're about to hear the very first session from the inaugural Business of Comedy conference. If you care about where comedy is heading, on stage, on screen, or in your social feed, this one matters. Titled Why the Laughter Economy Matters, this session brought together a heavyweight panel. Dr. Louise Mahler in the moderator's chair, with Nina Taylor MP, Dr. Mark Gibson and Wilbur Wilde, all sharing their perspectives from politics, academia and live performance. 4 big personalities on stage and a room full of people from film, television, podcasting, radio, animation and branding, all connected by one thing, comedy. So now enjoy the first session, Why the Laughter Economy Matters. Now, Louise is, you may have seen her in Morning Sunrise, and she's an expert in body language, and she can also control any man I've ever met, yeah. Although, we will see. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will hand over the microphone to our moderator for the first session at the inaugural Business of Comedy Conference, Louise Mahler. Thank you.
Can I just say how much I honour Maury for what he does and his leadership in this field. It is just amazing, and he's done it over years. Anyone who steps up and takes leadership, it's not that easy. And I welcome you all. There's people from industry. I think we're a bit thin on industry. We definitely have government and then from the cultural industries. And then I think there's a little bit of riffraff, Maury. So here we are for the inaugural session of the Laughter Economy, and my name is Louise Mahler, Dr. Louise Mahler, when my ego needs boosting, and I would love to welcome who we have on stage. I'd like to welcome Nina to the stage. Nina! I haven't met Nina before, but I loved her immediately when I saw the glasses. Don't you find that appealing? And the smile. Anyone who smiles. Mark, you're not going to get brownie points there, actually. And she's a member of the Legislative Assembly, and we're talking outside, has had an absolutely fascinating life in law, in the unions, as a teacher, living overseas and speaking fluently in German and French. And I hope that she will speak English today. We have, I'll actually introduce Mark next. Mark, who's not getting prizes for the smile, but he actually has a beautiful smile. He is a professor at RMIT and also an author, if you'd like to come up, Mark. Also an author. And there are 2 things. And what happens with Trump is when he goes for number 3, and he hasn't got a number 3, and he'll always say something like, and he's a good-looking rooster as well. So that's my 3rd thing there. And then we have Wilbur, who is coming up, Wilbur Wilde, now, Wilbur tells me that he can walk down any street in Melbourne and people will recognise him and love him and thank him for the laughs that they have given him over a lifetime. He's looking very seriously at me now. He's a saxophonist, a television personality and a radio presenter. Of course, best known for Hey Hey It's Saturday. Anyone see that? Yeah, in a big way. But a band, I love the band life, Old 55 and Joe Zip and the Falcons, TV shows. Paul, did you really do Paul Hogan show? Bloody hell. Paul Hogan Show, The Flying Doctors, Blankety Blank, Sale of the Century. The list goes on. Yeah, and he's been 4 radio channels. And Essendon fans here. Anyone Essendon, winning team? Essendon? Because you actually beat his team this week, Melbourne. I do not know what happened. And he's also golf. Very keen on golf. Welcome to the stage with video. Now, to get started, we will start. I think that we could all listen to Wilbur for the whole session, but we actually have the enormous honour of having Nina here as well. And Nina, we'd love you to ask some questions. So our format is to ask you to speak, to ask you some questions, and for each speaker to speak, and then we'll open to the floor for questions. So, Nina.
Okay. All right.
You've got a microphone, I think.
Yep. There we go. Style. All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also acknowledge any other elders who may be in the room with us here today, and also the esteemed panellists. And I will confer with Louise in terms of any further formal introductions, etc. So I pay respect in that regard. And it is a real pleasure to be here at the very first Business of Comedy conference, celebrating something, quite frankly, Melbourne does better almost than anywhere else in the world. Is that correct? Yeah. Yes, I think so. And really bringing people together through creativity, culture, and a very good laugh. Now, we all know Melbourne takes its coffee seriously, but we take our comedy just as seriously too, and the Melbourne International Comedy Festival is proof of that. Now, there is a sort of serious tenor to my presentation, but there are some important facts and figures that I want to get to in light of the concept here today, the fundamental tenet, the Business of Comedy Conference. So hence just giving you a flavour of where I'm going. So now celebrating its 40th anniversary, the festival has grown into the largest dedicated comedy festival in the world and one of Victoria's most loved cultural events. So across 3.5 weeks each March and April, it transforms our city into a stage featuring thousands of performers and hundreds of shows across venues big and small. But what happens on stage is only part of the story. In 2025 alone, the festival recorded, coming to some of the stats and figures, more than 646,000 tickets sold and over 707,000 attendances across nearly 8,000 performances, generating 22.9 million in box office revenue. And this year, attendance is expected to reach around 800,000 people, with approximately 2,000 performers across more than 750 shows. So those numbers reflect something powerful. Comedy brings people together, and when people come together, cities thrive. City of Melbourne data consistently shows that weekend nights during the festival are the highest spending periods for retail and hospitality. Restaurants, bars, hotels and small businesses feel the impact directly. The festival contributes an estimated $43.2 million to Victoria's economy and supports hundreds of jobs, from technicians and producers to front of house staff and creatives. This is the intersection of comedy, culture and government in action. Because when we invest in the arts, we're building vibrant, inclusive and economically resilient cities. Victoria's creative industries are a cornerstone of our economy. They contribute $41.2 billion annually and employ more than 331,000 Victorians. That's nearly 9% of our workforce. That's why, since coming to office, the Labor government has invested more than $3.5 billion into Victoria's creative industries. We were proud to establish Australia's first dedicated creative industries portfolio and to launch the nation's first creative industries strategy. These weren't symbolic gestures. They were a clear statement that creativity is central to who we are as Victorians. Comedy in particular has a unique role in shaping culture. It challenges us, connects us, and gives voice to perspectives that might otherwise go unheard. It helps us navigate difficult conversations, and sometimes it's the fastest way to build understanding across difference. And importantly, it reflects the diversity of our community. Whether it's supporting First Nations comedians through Deadly Funny or backing women and non-binary performers through the Victorian Government's Stand Up Grants program, we understand that great comedy comes from many perspectives and that inclusion makes us stronger and a lot funnier. This is what government can and should do: create the conditions for talent to emerge, for voices to be heard, and for industries to grow in ways that reflect our values. We are unapologetically the creative state. Sorry, Sydney. I don't know if there's anyone from Sydney here. No, that's all good. And that's fine then. And Melbourne's recognition as one of the world's most livable and culturally vibrant cities reflects that. This is not accidental. It's the result of sustained investment, thoughtful policy, and a deep understanding that culture is infrastructure. So, in conclusion, when we talk about the business of comedy, we're talking about more than ticket sales and touring circuits. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about innovation. We're talking about tourism. And we're talking about the kind of city we want to be. A city that is inclusive, a city that is creative, a city that is confident enough to laugh at itself and in doing so, grow stronger. And to everyone in the room, your work matters, not just to audiences, but to the economic and cultural fabric of our state. And as a government, we will continue to back you because when comedy thrives, our communities thrive. Thank you.
How fantastic to hear a politician who can really present and be interesting and vibrant and energetic and positive. And bravo. Absolutely, yeah. Brilliant. And I hear lots of positive in everything you're saying, which is fantastic. And yet at the same time, I'm seeing the reality and speaking to Maury about how a comedy is the poor cousin, and that comedy has perhaps diminished within our community understanding. And Mark shaking his head there, nodding his head. So there's a mismatch there that we need to explore. And one of the issues is that if we look at ballet, we look at orchestra, we look at the other creative industries, and I believe this is something that Jack will be speaking about this afternoon, they have a home. They have a place where they come together. You talked about the massive funding for comedy, and yet there is no home. Where is this money going? Should it go towards a centre? Not wanting to take away from your session, Jack, but how great to have a politician here to answer that question.
Yeah, with our Victorian government, so we consider comedy to be part of the creative industries. I think that goes without saying.
Right.
And Victorian government supports comedy performers, projects and events in a number of ways. So I'm going to go through some of those things, but that doesn't mean I'm not here to listen and to hear what you want to contribute about your authentic experience. So I just want to put that caveat because you're living it, but I do need to reflect on that as well. So comedy projects are eligible for grants through the Creative Victoria programs. Recently we've supported comedy short films and comedy tours through Creative Victoria programs, including the Creative Projects Fund and Touring Victoria. We also back comedy projects through Vic Screen's screen investment programs like the upcoming ABC series Bad Company, which will bring together some of our local comedy royalty, Anne Edmonds and Kitty Flanagan, and Sam Pang's upcoming series Ground Up. We invest in the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, but just to make it clear, this investment is not just for the Melbourne event. It is for the year-round program, including Comedy Festival, the Comedy Festival Roadshow and the comedy development programs the team runs, including Class Clowns, Deadly Funny, Raw Comedy, which have been significant incubators for local talent. I would also say comedy is a core part of so many of the festivals we support, including Melbourne Fringe Festival, Shepparton Festival and Castlemaine State Festival. It's also part of the programming mix for the network of regional performing arts centres statewide that receive Victorian government investment. And obviously we always encourage people to sign up for Creative Victoria's e-news and follow them on social media for up-to-date information on funding opportunities. I just have to spell that out because we don't want people to miss out on grant rounds, which are a really important way of supporting industry. Having said that, I am here to listen as much as to discuss the matters, so I look forward to what others have to say on this issue.
Great. So that's there is money there. There is money going towards comedy as well as other areas. So what I've heard is that people are saying it would be a great basis to have a centre, a home, a place. And in those things that you said, I didn't hear for funding for a home, for a base. Would that be correct? And so would you support a home for comedy? And if so, in your area, which is, right in the hub of comedy, South, Melbourne, St Kilda, the city, Albert Park, what do you think?
So I know that my seat, I feel very fortunate, has, if not, I think, the largest number of arts organisations in the world, and I feel incredibly fortunate for that. Now, how I feel about that isn't the critical element, because it is about community and obviously the city that thrives, to the point I was making from the outset. Sorry, I must speak into that. What I would say, I don't want to be prescriptive about what should or should not be. There are all sorts of great innovations that are put forward to government every day, whether it be, strictly speaking, in the business world or otherwise. So again, there is a new Minister for Creative Industries. I would be shot and quartered by the Treasurer if I said, yes, and you can have this. However, I am an advocate for community. I do that every single day, all day. I'm always beating down doors, and when you continually push, you get outcomes. So by all means, put forward the suggestions that you have. I'm happy to take them forward. I just can't say, yes, this is guaranteed, because I need to have discussions, etc.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is that you are supportive of that idea, which the community mindset comes up and says a centre would be great. And although that's not your responsibility, you are happy to take that forward, which I think is great. And in your area? Oh,
absolutely. I mean, why not? It makes good sense, right? Just add to this beautiful, thriving arts community. Thank you very much. So again, there are many, many details, obviously, that have to be mapped out, because when we're talking, as we all know, I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know, when you're looking at businesses, etc., they have to be sustainable, and it has to be something that, and also none the least for the performers themselves, because you see businesses that thrive and others that don't. So, and the arts, it's a particularly challenging industry, I would say.
Yeah.
So let's explore the conversation. How does that sound?
Good, okay. Now, recognised, is there a recognition that comedy is a fantastic financial product? And we're seeing, I'm not comparing this to your figures, but I've got 550,000 tickets sold for the football final, and 770,000 tickets sold for the comedy festival. And that's, and that's over 1 month. What if that were to be 11 months, that there was this vibrance in the industry, and it really is a solid, and I know it's difficult. Look, I've had an experience in the last 24 hours where I wanted a mortgage for a new apartment, and I'm speaking to some young man at the bank about give me the money, and to have been treated like shit, and and I'm like, are you listening to me? You should be screaming for my loan, screaming for it. And I feel a parallel there, in that this is a thriving industry that is making money. It's not just about comedy, it's about actually there's money there. Can you hear me, government? We need the home, we need the support. And I'm really, thriving off Maury's energy for this. So do you see it as a financial, not just something where we can get grants, but that can offer back financial success?
Well, what I will say, I think we can, without sounding arrogant, say that, for instance, with the Melbourne Comedy Festival, it is arguably the biggest in the world, or one of the 3 top in the world. So we know how to do it, and I'm not saying me, myself, I wouldn't dare do stand-up, I wouldn't have a clue what to do, but I'm just saying for the experts in the field. But again, and I'm not saying it can or it cannot be, and it's certainly a great... it's a great concept, and I don't want to just say concept, because that probably is massively understating what you're proposing, but you have to look at what is the proposition and what is the proposition and how would it work? So you do need to get down to the granular detail.
Okay, I think that's where Mark's going to help us out here. Mark's going to help us out here, but...
I'm a pointy-headed guy.
What's that?
Pointy-headed guy.
It was interesting because Jenny's here and she's photographing, and Jenny goes around the world, and she just told me before we started that she actually works at the Edinburgh Festival, she works at the Adelaide Festival, and yet I know, welcome Jenny from England, and she said that in the house that she's staying in, none of them have heard of the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and that she feels it's not, you just said it's the best comedy festival in the world, and we think that is, but Jenny actually said that her opinion was that wasn't as recognised as she would like to see, which I just thought was interesting. I think there's work to be done. Melbourne is a powerhouse of comedy, and some people are saying that light is fading. Is there a policy that could be brought forward to encourage more Australian content, more recognition? Wilbur's nodding his head. For specifically Victorian talent when we were a powerhouse. Nina, that's fascinating. You're nodding your head as though that's a new revelation.
I'm just thinking about what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I'm speaking to people and hearing that Melbourne in particular is fading, and yet the talent is still here. Could there be a policy to put forward Melbourne talent? Let me go on, that there seemed to be a lot of programs that were produced in Melbourne that came from Melbourne, the talent was from Melbourne, and they're all gone. TV programs. So name those, Murray. There was Full Frontal, Frontline, Fast Forward. We're all Melbourne initiatives. Yeah, so what we're hearing is that Melbourne is really a hub for comedy, but it's stand-up comedy, and it's no longer the centre for the commercial ventures like TV. It was the case in the 90s, but that's when the program's happening. Anyway, Nina, we've got Nina online here for a policy for Victorian talent, which is what people had asked.
Yes, so definitely I have probably zero expertise in TV and that aspect and the comparisons with Sydney. Well, these are things that should be probably thoroughly evaluated because, yes, to your point, I had, with the information I've been provided, which I'm relying on, we were arguably the top in the world or the top three when it comes to, particularly with the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and certainly the investments of government are to generate and incubate all year round. It isn't just about those 3 weeks. Do you want more? I get that completely. And certainly when it comes to, we are starting a little bit of an intersection. I get there's the Victoria-Sydney element, but TV can cut through at a national level as well. So there's there'll be a couple of intersects there, and when it comes to the federal level, that's a little bit of a different conversation because I'd need to talk to the Federal Arts Minister about that, just to be respectful in terms of funding, allocation, etc. But that's when I think, but isn't it that we would be looking at, in addition to what Creative Victoria, the understanding that they have there, we would be looking to industry professionals for their advice, I would say. Right. Why do you think that there is a difference in terms of if people, as you were saying, some of them are going to Sydney or otherwise? I don't think I would be the bastion of knowledge on that particular aspect. Happy to hear the feedback on that. Why not put it forward? Why do you think this is so?
Yeah, so it's a complicated field. I'm hearing there's stand-up, there's television, there's different verticals, as Maury would say, and comedy goes across them all. And this is, and we could go around in circles for the rest of the year. Jack, you'd love to see.
Testing 1, 2, 3. When I was doing stand-up comedy and I had a very good ride, I was able to do stand-up comedy on Hey Hey It's Saturday, Midday Show, The Big Gig, and Steve Vizard's Tonight Show, all in the same year.
Brilliant.
So I could be doing stand-up 8 times a year. Now, we've had a real lack of variety shows. We all know that. In fact, I watch The Front Bar. That's my variety show for the week because it's funny and I love footy.
Excellent.
It is a shame that the only time we see stand-up on TV these days is galas.
Yeah.
And that is the height of mediocrity, I've got to tell you. Comedy festival galas are dreadful. And that is what people are seeing, and I'm continually getting texts and emails saying, how lame was that? Oh. So it's a shame that people at home are only seeing stand-up comedy at comedy festival galas, and it's not the top end of comedy. So it's a real shame, and it is a shame that there's not these programs that are on TV like we used to have. I'm really missing shows like Mad as Hell.
Right.
Stephen Hall will be later, or he'll be there in my session, and shows like that just should be on continually. And now I know Sean McHale did his bit and wanted somebody else to take his place with a great sketch show, but we haven't had a sketch show like that since, and I don't know if there's anyone in the what's that? Oh, Troy Kinney, yeah. There's some real talent out there, but yes, we need to see more of it on TV, and we need strong comedy on TV, not weak comedy on TV. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
So a real plea for more, and then saying, let's talk from our political representative, let's talk and let's try and make this work as one way forward. Question? My very basic understanding of a home would be that it would be creative writing, workshops, a place for people to come together, and that does need a physical home, perhaps, and people sparking off face to face. I'm not a great advocate for virtual in terms of creativity. I just think it diminishes the experience altogether. Great. Well, that's going to be Jack's session this afternoon to discuss the logistics of that base. It's lovely to have a local councillor here. Jack, were you going to say something?
I'm just wondering if Nina and, sorry, your name again is? Betty. If Nina and Betty are able to come to the session that I'm moderating at 2:30. It'd be valuable if they could make it to that session.
Mm-hmm.
What's
I'm
the story?
actually representing a minister for another event. I don't think I could physically get there. I would love to come, so I'm very happy to have a conversation, so don't get me wrong. And this is the only issue. This is why I'm being a little bit cautious. When you sink rents into places, etc., you're just tipping money down the drain. So that was the only bit of caution. It's not about not creating a hub, but how do we do it in a viable way? So you're not sinking your money into rent, but that money is going into, say, promotion and developing the kind of quality comedy output that you want, because we have many facilities, whether they are state or council. Can we take more advantage of what existing infrastructure? That's all I was thinking.
Yeah, and sure, it's got to make financial sense, but my understanding is that this is all about recognising comedy as it actually has a financial opportunity, and that it is something that does create funding for the state, that is worthwhile, that really deserves that funding, and will give back. And anyway, who's got all the statistics? Nina, thank you very much, is Mark. And Mark,
Thanks.
You've got a presentation?
Louise. Well, I do have a presentation. I mean, Maury wanted me to do some of the pointy-headed stuff, provide some figures. But Nina's provided quite a lot already. One of the things I thought I would do is just, thanks for inviting me here. Great to be part of this conversation. I think it's a really important conversation. And props to Maury for bringing everyone together. I think we could start with sort of two basic facts. One is, as Nina was saying, there is a very significant economy built around comedy. So in Melbourne we have the Comedy Festival. There's also the screen production industry. So it's launched major franchises like Working Dog, The Chaser, Riley Turner Productions, etc. If you take everything associated with the Comedy Festival, not just the ticket sales, but all the spillovers, tourism, all of these kind of things, then according to their annual report last year, the contribution to the Victorian economy was something in the order of $88 million. So there is a lot of money around comedy. But I just wanted to kind of pair that up with the other fact about comedy, is that a lot of comedians are not making a lot of money. And when you ask, and we've done some fairly low-level surveys with the project I'm involved with, Comedy Country. Peter Beaglehole in Adelaide has done some surveys of comedians, and a lot of festival comedians are not making anything from their work. There's international research by there's a UK team at Brunel University who've done research on comedians in the UK. And about 3/4 of comedians really rely on other forms of income. It's something they do alongside their main job, I suppose, and it's something they do for love. So I suppose a real challenge there is, how do you get these things to come together? So you do have a great economic potential. You've got a lot of people who are doing it for love. How do you get a better relationship between those two things, so that the kind of potential of the creative potential of people who do comedy because they love it, and the economic potential that is there, I think, in comedy, how do you get a better relationship between those things? So I think that's why this conversation is really important. And I think one of the things that we've been dealing with before in some of the conversation is the loss of a certain kind of conduit which made that happen. I work with Steve Vizard, and in our book Fringe to Famous, I wrote with Tony Moore and others at Monash. We looked at the ways in which all these kind of fringe, this energy in Melbourne, in the fringe, around the Pram Factory, La Mama, etc., in the 70s and 80s, how that got into things like Fast Forward, big major comedy franchises, and it was really the economies of broadcasting which made that possible. Broadcasting is not what it used to be, and it no longer provides the same kind of conduit, and we have also a particular problem now because of the centralisation of film and television in Sydney. It's much more difficult to do, but I suppose the kind of relationships we need to be thinking about other things, and I think maybe Maury, if you just go on to the next slide. So I don't have this written here, unfortunately, but I've got to crane my neck a little bit. But if you take film and TV, you've got about $3 billion a year in the Australian screen industry, with about 25,000 equivalent jobs. The figures are up there. So if you figure that as around 20% of that might be comedy. This is very notional, so these figures have to be treated with great deal of caution. I'm not presenting them as kind of academically verified, something I'd want to publish in a journal, but I think it's useful to try to do a bit of a back of the envelope exercise here. And so I think you could arrive at a figure of about $600 million per annum in comedy, in film, in screen production. Next slide, Maury. So look at festivals, and Nina, you've already given us a lot of great figures from the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. I've cited that figure, the sort of headline figure in their report, $88 million. Then you've got other festivals, and we want to try to make this national as well as Victorian, but there are dedicated comedy festivals, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, Hobart. There's also the Fringe festivals, which have a very high comedy ratio, Adelaide, Perth. Then there are touring events and shows, the Best of Edinburgh, Raw Comedy, etc. So we might arrive at a figure of about 100 million from those areas. Maury, next slide. Feel a bit like Wizard of Oz here.
Is that a substantial figure in your eyes, Nina, 100 million?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we always have to be, think about other, I mean, if you're talking about other major industries, and within the creative industries, music is a bigger field, but comedy is very significant. I think that point really needs to be made. And I suppose the reason it's not generally made is because comedy is not a vertical, so it's not measured. And in all there's great work being done around in the creative industries departments, and in things like in the academic field, Australia's been a bit of a leader with a Centre of Excellence at QUT, based at QUT. A lot of really important data has been collected, but generally speaking, it's not collected about comedy specifically. It's collected around screen and television. It's collected around live performance and so on. So I suppose what we're asking here is the question, what might it be to think in a more dedicated way about comedy and what it does in it specifically?
That's fascinating, Mark,
yeah.
because that's you've picked a really obvious, spot the obvious mistake. It's not measured.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Just to the final one, which is really worth, and I know this is going to be covered later in the program, but social media entertainment, what Stuart Cunningham and David Craig in their book called Social Media Entertainment. So here we have Auntie Donna. There's obviously a lot of content online which is comedic, and so there's a huge kind of a comedy economy there, which we are really only just still learning to unpack, and books like Stuart and David Craig's book is a really important contribution. So they've kind of planted the flag there, but I think to kind of look at that, to get into the extent of the comedy and where the money is being made. I think really there's some difficult questions around value capture, who's making the money out of these online economies, and there's a whole lot of criticism of the extent to which a lot of this flows, of course, to the global media platforms. How much of that comes back to comedians? So I think that's an important area of conversation, is how we get those economies working well for comedians and for the generation of content. I haven't put a comedy a value estimate there because I think it's too difficult to do. Did I have another slide, Maury? I forget. So just until I see your hand, but just to cover off on one final thing, one of the things that was done in the creative industries research work was talk about this thing that was called the creative trident, and this is trying to draw attention to the fact that creative work has value not only where it's really obvious, like in a comedy show in our case, but it spills out into many other areas. So you have support workers, producers, agents, managers, the financial, etc. These are all jobs that are related to creative work, but are not counted necessarily as, or not always counted as creative work. And then you have what Cunningham and Higgs call embedded creatives. Those who, for us, these are creatives who have skills developed in a creative field, but don't work in that field, but nevertheless use some of their skills there. So the use of comedy skills in advertising, podcasting, tourism, corporate communication, etc. I've got an image there from the, I think many people will know the Nissan 3-litre turbocharged ad with hair on end. It's using a comedic premise in advertising. So there's a whole conversation that could be had about the extent of the contribution of comedy to non-comedy areas of the economy. So I think that's another thing to think about. I might leave it there, Louise, just as my initial contribution.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mark. The difficulty in measuring comedy is, and what an honour to have you here, who devotes your research to that, and then you're identifying there are even new fields like social media comedy that are coming in, and then, of course, the whole difficulty of all the support fields that come in. It's a complicated area to manage, but yet more important than we think, maybe. And so, you Wilbur's here, and Wilbur, you know what? I mean, Wilbur, all of those verticals of comedy, Wilbur goes across so many of those: music, stand-up, television, everything. You're across those verticals. We have one of the most renowned icons in Australia of that industry. But one of the things that's interesting is listening to Wilbur outside, and I didn't know Wilbur before this, is his skills of listening and understanding the industry and an inquiring mind is just amazing. Just amazing the way you delved into the topics. And we have this wealth of industry right here. Wilbur, so I just pass it to you.
Hey, what Mark had to say, great. Nina, with the government support, look, there's... So a couple of things that stood out to me were just this sort of consensus of opinion that's been mentioned, tell me if I'm wrong here, that we'll have a look at the business model and if it stacks up. And there was assent that the business model of whatever comedic project we're working on needs to stack up. I don't reckon it does. That's a big hurdle. Statistics, great, and as Mark Twain said, statistics are like women of the night. Once you've got them down, you can do pretty much anything you like with them. It's fucking Mark Twain. It wasn't me. Jesus. So. I'm thinking, look, I try to boil it down. Look, I can take a year to reach the point, but here's the thing, right? Here's one thing. A living wage for artists. a home for comedy, if we're going to go down this road, one thing I would think of, or a comparison, and it can be the thief of joy. Country music in Nashville has the Grand Ole Opry. Burlesque has the Moulin Rouge. Jazz has the Lincoln Centre. And we have an incredible arts precinct in Melbourne. Louise is an opera singer amongst her many talents, right? We've got the MSO have a home at the ABC building. I think it's still there. They were once talking about taking over the quarantine station at Portsea as a home for the MSO. It didn't happen. But, they are recognised, they have gravitas in the arts. Comedy needs to have that gravitas. And as we've listened to both Nina and Mark Gibson, the gravitas is already there. I mean, it's fait accompli. It's a lay down misère when we start talking about, you mentioned, or Mark mentioned, the Pram Factory, the Australian Performing Group in the 70s, gave us things like Elvin Purple, Barry Humphries, the Bazza McKenzie movie. Like when I was a kid, 1970, Mum took us to see Barry Humphries at the Playbox, and it was just, profound. I was like maybe 14 or 15, and I'll speak to the cultural effects just briefly here. In 1970 in Melbourne, for the Barry Humphries show, and Mum was there, and she wasn't married, she was a single woman, and she took us to see Barry Humphries in a show called Ye Load of Old Stuff, STUFFE, and his characters were all there, and Sandy Stone and Lance Boyle, the unionist, and of course Dame Edna. I mean, these are world exports, right? But one thing I remember from that, and it was hilarious, but one thing I remember was from the interval at the Playbox in old Russell Street, was it? Or Exhibition, right. And during the interval, I remember, they said, and the announcer sort of came on and said, the show will recommence in 11 minutes. Right, and of course, there were people standing at the bar, and they heard that voice. And, there's a couple of blokes standing. It's 1970 in Melbourne, right? There's a couple, and you hear a little bit, the show will recommence like this. Then, a couple of minutes later, the show will recommence in 9 minutes. Don't mock me, please. And it just kept on going. The voice of the announcer became more indignant. The show will recommence in 5 minutes, you bastards. Don't mock me. It's like, I remember Phyllis, our dear mum, who was like, she was a woman who lived in her time. She was pissing herself laughing, as were everybody in the bar. And I mean, that was addressing, this is back in the days when university professors were being beaten up and thrown into the river in Adelaide, So, for issues like, that's not just a cultural issue that comedy's taking on. That's a mental health issue, all right? And in the before times, you should talk to people about what got them through the pandemic and what's got them through the financial crisis that we were discussing earlier on. Laugh. This is what I'm saying. I mean, I almost don't need to speak to the value to us personally of comedy. How do we, though, with legislation, federal and state, get the funding or the mechanics by which those artists to whom you referred, who have got creative talent, yet they've got to have, another couple of jobs to sustain that. I've been very fortunate. I was a musician, well, I still am, and that's what I'm on my entry cards back into Australia when I've been, they said, what do you do? Well, I'm a musician, that's what I write. But it's taken me in a journey of the performing arts to which Louise referred, where I've been able to, and it was, the television led to a lot of stuff. I got to do theatre and I got to do advertising. And I still hang out with, there's a couple of great creative friends of mine. I mean, I wrote some jingles and did some creative and copy, but it was because it was funny, and great advertising, which still exists. For instance, my favourite bits at the moment have been the Iranian Lego stuff. I think just so fucking clever and so hip. But, just forget the politics of it. As far as branding and advertising, it's just really good, bright stuff. And there's lots of other stuff. That Toyota ad is it's funny, and it draws on this fantastic background of, I don't know, cynicism is not how I describe it. That does not do the Australian sense of humour justice. I mean, there's just this great, okay, it's the she'll be right, mate, and the gallows sense of humour when our friends are, ill, and say, oh look, I can't. I probably won't be at golf today because I've just had a colonoscopy and they've found a polyp and they've got you go, all right, well, do you want to come after lunch then? I mean, it's just because this is how we cope. We have, there's coping skills along the way. I like to think that I've inherited my mother's coping skills. Dad died in a car accident in 1959. She kept going. She had, my big brother, and she was 7 months pregnant with our sister. Mm-hmm. She still laughed. We can still laugh at it. So for us to find, the Grand Ole Opry, the Lincoln Centre, the things like that, if there was a funded, there was some funding that just sort of made the arts a little easier, and there are aspects of some areas of the arts which are made a little bit easier, but they're not comedy, as far as I can see. Festivals, great, and it's all very nice to say that the Melbourne Festival is, brings that much to the economy, and it runs over 2 weeks. And the Fringe Festival in Adelaide, I did a show at the Fringe this year in Adelaide, my first, and it was a great learning experience. Financially, it cost me money, but I learnt from it, and I might go back to the Fringe. The Fringe is for kids. But you get over there and there's 300 acts. And, there's Dave Hughes and Sammy J. Went to see Sammy J's show, and there's internationals. There's a guy named Arthur Hull, who did a show he came over to Melbourne, did the Comedy Festival. He got a fantastic review. Arthur was in our dressing room, a demountable out the back of the Fringe. This is the glamour behind the glamour behind the glamour. Mm-hmm. And, this is the life of the artist. It's, it shouldn't be easy, but I mentioned at the top, a living wage. It happens in Denmark and Scandinavia, where if you're an artist, you get, and I mean, there's a political football for you to kick around, Nina.
We have a wealth of experience and knowledge here, and we also have a time constraint and very important questions.
Yeah. I'll stop helping. That's how things generally work best.
I'm sure you're here, and I want to talk to you afterwards. Maury, a question.
Oh, yeah. So we do have a little bit of time for questions. I will add there is some food afterwards for those that missed out on the breakfast.
Thank you.
In the break between the next session, there is some food outside. I've got some questions, and I'll throw to anyone here. So this is one for Nina. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Tony Burke, he's federal, so not your responsibility, but same party. He is essentially the Creative Industries Minister and the Home Affairs Minister. Colin Brooks, he's Victoria. He's your Colin. Oh,
They've just changed.
Oh, it just changed. Okay. Well, he hasn't updated his website, but he was the Advanced Manufacturing Minister and the Creative Industries Minister. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you feel like, I do, mate, do you agree with what I feel, that sometimes the arts, and the arts in general, the performing arts in general, not just comedy, are kind of an add-on
to bigger, more important industries?
I would say no. First of all, I was thinking about, the investment that Victoria puts into the arts and the value as a Labor government. Certainly, it is extremely important. The Melbourne Arts Precinct, for instance, it's $1.7 billion investment just to rebuild that whole sector and to also make it all work a lot better in terms of, fostering our arts industry. But you can't look at the packing in of what portfolios ministers cover. I think that's just it's actually quite unfair, because the Attorney General, for instance, is covering obviously the law. She's also covering planning, and now she's covering finance. Each of those portfolios is huge and very significant. So I just think you can't read the portfolios in that way. And I'm not just saying that, I'm saying that objectively with what portfolios people carry. So I would take heart in the fact that Victoria was the first place to set up a creative arts, creative industries strategy and portfolio, etc. That is a testament to what we value and the extent to which we do invest today. And it's not a day of the week that I don't get. Well, actually, and this is not a complaint, but organisations, whether they are multicultural affairs, whether they are housing or otherwise, because 70 or 80% of the work I do is helping people with homelessness. So just to give some perspective, this is not to dismiss the significance of this, because this actually fosters jobs and keeps our community alive and thriving, and then we actually have a cultural city and a cultural identity. But understanding that, and mandated literacy reforms, because I'm Parliamentary Secretary for Education, which help kids not to fall through the cracks and actually maybe one day become professional arts people. And just this week I went to an event on behalf of a minister by the Push called an Amplify Summit, and it was about giving young people that opportunity to be able to intersect with industry professionals and to have the experience of performing, of writing songs and other things. Now, I know we're talking about comedy and perhaps elevating the identity of comedy as its own entity, and not just under the umbrella of creative arts. And what I was going to say, so I'll end here because I don't want to rub it on myself, and I'm sure others want to comment, is that from today, so I don't know how many more questions you have, I'm very happy to meet after this and get down to granular detail to really understand further, and forgive me, but the overarching ideas are good, but we always, and it's the lawyer in me, we have to bring it down to what does that actually mean? What does it look like? What do you want to see? So I'm happy to meet after this, only because we just aren't going to cover enough of that detail in this forum. It won't be adequate. And then I'm happy to advocate on behalf of what it is that you are seeking. But true to my nature, I'm a straight shooter, so I would rather not people please today and say, yep, it's going to happen and this is the date. I would rather actually deliver on something, but I want to know what it actually means first. So let this not be the end just in this conversation today, okay? The living wage, that is a national conversation, and I'm not saying that to be dismissive, because no state government has a revenue base to fund that. Just to understand that is just a financial, that's just a financial fact. It has to be a national thing. So, but I understand the point.
And another sidebar is that I hear from all of this that Maury's question about federal and state politicians who have diverse portfolios is that that's an area for Mark to look at, which is what percentage of the time do federal and state spend on that portfolio compared to their other portfolios. Have you looked at that at all?
Well, not in great detail, but I mean, it is often said about Tony Burke that he doesn't give as much time as he might to the creative industries. And,
yeah,
Nina,
a bit like Nina, though. How much?
Yeah.
How much? Zero.
Because there's another element to this, and this is the way in which the arts has been rolled into industry portfolios. So that's the kind of creative industries idea. And the idea of the early 2000s was that the way to get arts noticed is to stop talking about subsidy, talking about industry development. That's the kind of, that was the shift that occurred. And to some extent it's worked, but sometimes, or there are certainly critics of that move as well, who think that the specific attention to the arts, and that term tends not to be used anymore, has been dropped out a little bit because it's kind of rolled into kind of industry development things. Yeah.
I'd like to speak to Tony Burke. Speak of Tony Burke. Tony Burke spoke brilliantly at my 22-year-old son Elliot's graduation from NIDA Musical Theatre last year before. Tony Burke spoke so well in front of all of those really talented young adults who are aspiring to go on their journey through the performing arts, whether it's comedy, whether it's acting, whether it's singing. Like music theatre is a year-long course. Elliot, my son, just smashed it. I mean, he's a very talented kid. Tony Burke came out and spoke, really connected. I thought it was, I mean, he made me clutch at my pearls with his understanding of, he said he wanted to be a director and he'd applied to NIDA. You know, so I think he's a good egg, Tony Burke.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, and so you know to have somebody like that on our side is great, and you know I mean he gets it right. And the other wonderful moment was I was on a panel for the Helpman Awards for live performance, and Keating came out one night to present an award, and it was in the Lyric Theatre at Star City, and of course, you know, I mean, it was just, he was surrounded, you know, it was 2,500 people in there who agreed with, and we all agreed with each other as to how important the arts were. He came out and went, oh, this quote, he came out, he was introduced as a standing O anyway, it's a standing O for Keating anyway, and he just came out and stood at the lectern. And before he presented the award, he said, "Comrades, the Visigoths are at the castle gates." Standing ovation anyway. It was just a fantastic moment because Keating got it. We need, you know, and Gough got it too, you know. We're talking about, you know, Nina went back to study law. She didn't have to pay for university. I had to pay for the 6 months. Oh no, sorry, that you paid. Louise didn't have to pay for university, right? You know, so this is. Did you pay?
Well,
no, great. Couple of professional students. No, I'm kidding. But you know, so
I've got another question here. Can I?
Yeah, I was. Well, okay, great. Well, you know, I just think that having like-minded people there, I default to optimism when you've got people like Tony Burke and Nina Taylor on our side too, you know.
And I'll play devil's advocate and say I've seen him do some of the worst presentations I've ever seen, you know, and that you can do a great presentation, but where's the deliverables? Well, and that's what this is all about, is the deliverables. Great bloke, we all agree. Politicians are great people. You know, everyone I meet, wonderful person. Now deliver, and
let's
you know,
hound them until they die.
Yeah. So another question.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on something that both Nina and Mark were talking about, and also Jack to another extent. So, I'm interested in your views on some of the tensions that are present here that we haven't quite made explicit. So there's a tension between thinking about comedy and art as industry and as economic powerhouse and economically influential and profitable ventures. And then what Wilbur was saying in terms of like comedians themselves aren't making money, right? So there's this kind of business model tension between having something that is for profit and having spaces that are for profit and for growing the economy of comedy. But then you also, generally speaking, have not-for-profit structures. So Melbourne International Comedy Festival is a not-for-profit venture, right? So all the profit it makes just goes back into supporting comedy. And you have privately owned full-time comedy venues that are for-profit and that are seeking to make money and build themselves as a business. And they are community-minded to different extents, and they do invest in their own communities. So you have this big spectrum of ways to build the industry of comedy and the business of comedy. But some of them are in tension with one another, You also have a huge spectrum of experience. You have people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars from comedy. You have people who are losing money by performing comedy when they're getting started, and they have to hold down other jobs and things like that. So providing a range of economic support looks different for the people when you're funding them at the top versus when you're funding the up-and-comers. And then finally, I think there's a bit of a tension between comic style and comic community here as well. Like, we're talking about building a hub for comedy. What does that mean in a creative sense? Who is that for? And, you know, like, this is such a great space. We have some real legends in the room, which is amazing, and we have some people who are at the very start of their journeys. But we're missing the middle. We're missing representatives from Comedy Republic, from the Comics Lounge, from other spaces that are working in the industry, and or even people from like Motley Bear House or places like that, which are alternative comedy spaces. And I've just named 3 really, really different communities that may or may not want to talk to one another. There's politics in that as well. So when we talk about building a hub for comedy, there's tension in that, because who is that for? How is that funded? Who's creating it? How can we make sure that everybody can come to the table in an equal way, no matter what style of comedy they're doing, no matter how far along in their career they're at, like whatever it is they need, how can we build that in a way that's like inclusive and respectful, but also that kind of retains that tension, because that tension is productive. Comedy is countercultural, right?
Yeah, so is this the same for many industries that have, there are people who make money, people who don't make money, businesses that go bankrupt.
Yeah,
this is about lifting comedy to an industry base rather than something that just gets funding. Now, there are complications with building that industry, and these are questions that will go to the hub. Who is it for? How would you make that work with the different political entities? And they're questions that will get answered. It's not easy, but I think the issue here is about raising comedy from poor cousin, give me money for funding, and saying, actually, could we look at that a different way, with comedy as an industry with a centre leading the world, because there is a real core of competence here in Melbourne in particular, and there will be challenges. Maury, have we... Okay.
Who? No, let Wilbur be. It's actually a question for Nina. In this room, we're all very passionate about, this niche market of comedy, which isn't niche, it permeates everything in the arts world, and it certainly uplifts people. But when we come to, as a first-time politician and councillor, we don't specify the arts bucket, so to speak, by category. Like ballet doesn't get a certain wedge, and opera doesn't get a certain wedge. And what I'm hearing here is comedy wants their own wedge. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to sort of, get Nina to either confirm that I'm correct or incorrect, because what I see from a local council is very organised organisations chasing grants and developing that industry and working in partnership with all different collaborative organisations, both non-for-profit and for-profit and government. So I think I just want to sort of map out a bit of a roadmap here where, is it more about the comedy scene that's very silo, uniting under an umbrella and using their power to lobby and get the support, whether it be public or private? Because I think sort of expecting the state government to just create this whole honeypot for comedians overnight isn't realistic, as much as I'd love for it to happen. So how do we get part of that arts dollar is the question that I'm hearing here, or am I wrong? Wilbur?
I have one sentence. I think the premise is it's harder to get funding for comedy than it is for other stuff.
Betty, that's great. I think you put the pin, let's hammer it, is that it is a very complicated field. Who is running it? And that's what we're here for, is that Maury has put this together with key industry figures. And I'd like to thank our panel very much for contributing their time. Yay.
And I would like to thank Louise Marler for controlling a very powerful panel. Thank you. Thank you all.